Now, Paul Heyman appeared with Roman Reigns on ESPN the other day, First Take. And he was asked by Stephen A. Smith how he would rank himself in wrestling history. And he was in character during the interview. Heyman said he would rank himself as the GOAT. And when Smith brought up Bobby the Brain Heenan's name, Heyman replied with, "Screw him, he's dead. And Jimmy Hart's still alive, which proves that God doesn't answer my prayers." I can't believe how many people reacted to this like he was shooting or shooting on Bobby or defaming Bobby Heenan and disrespecting Bobby Heenan. I didn't know Bobby Heenan personally. So I'm not going to pretend that I was the man's friend and I can tell you exactly how he would feel if he were alive today and he heard that. But I am 100% confident that if Bobby Heenan heard Paul Heyman saying that during an in-character interview, he would smile and say, "That guy gets it." And Heyman then would invite him out to a nice steakhouse for dinner. I think he would have loved it. I thought it was great. And on the list of the greatest managers of all time, the top three is Bobby Heenan, number 1, Paul Heyman, number 2, and Jim Cornette, number 3. And I would probably put Jimmy Hart at number 4. Heenan was so great and such a valuable part of that growth period in the 80s. And across more than just one promotion, too, because before WWE, it was the AWA. But he was so valuable to WWE in the 80s that at one point, they had him managing basically all of the top heels on the roster. I'm not saying some of them, practically all of them. Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy, Big John Studd, Paul Orndorff, Harley Race, Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect. They used Heenan to introduce Ric Flair to the company with the big gold belt in '91. Go back even before that, Heenan in the AWA and his time managing Nick Bockwinkel. The guy could do it all. He could talk, he could bump, which is why he ended up with the bad neck. He would get incredible heat, but he could also make you laugh your ass off. He could do it all. He could do commentary, the self-deprecating humor, and he did it with the quickest wit that I have ever seen from anybody ever in the wrestling business. And he did it for 3 decades. Heyman doesn't call himself a manager, he calls himself an advocate. Or he calls himself a special counsel. And the reason he does that is because he once said that he can't be the greatest manager of all time because Bobby Heenan already is. And he doesn't want to be the second best manager, but he could be the best advocate. So that's why he calls himself an advocate. So Heyman, despite what he said on First Take, he holds Bobby in very high regard. He's a hype man. But that's what a manager is. They hype their man up as best they can. In some cases where maybe talking isn't their client's strong suit, they do the talking for them. They help make up for whatever weaknesses they may have. Heyman always handled the talking for Brock Lesnar because it was never Brock's strong suit. Or at least we thought it wasn't Brock's strong suit. It's still not his strong suit, but he's much better at it now that he's had the chance to come out of his shell. Right? He doesn't need Heyman. I would still like to see a Heyman-Lesnar reunion one more time before either one of them call it a day, but Brock no longer needs him. Heyman worked with CM Punk, who certainly didn't need somebody to do the talking for him, but they made a great combo also, as does Heyman and Roman Reigns. Roman has come a long way with his promos. He doesn't need Paul Heyman, but the tribal chief character, it works so much better with him than without him. Heyman, sometimes he gets physical, he'll interfere in matches. He'll take a bump every now and then. It might not look great, but he takes a bump. He is, by whatever definition you want to use, a wrestling manager, even if he chooses not to call himself that. And he is one of the best of all time. But he is not the best of all time. Now, if you want to argue the merits based on storyline accomplishments, Heyman managed Brock Lesnar when he broke Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania. And he's managed Roman Reigns through each of the past 3 WrestleMania main events. And he's been part of the Bloodline story, right? One of the greatest stories ever told in the history of this company. So if you just look at it from that perspective, then yeah, sure, you could argue Heyman is number 1, but that's a whole different argument altogether. One other note from this weekend, this comes per Nick Hausman on his House of Wrestling website, houseofwrestling.com. Big E, of course, everybody remembers it was March of last year. Big E got dropped on his head, broke his neck on a belly-to-belly suplex on the floor from Ridge Holland. And a few months after the injury, he updated people, and he noted that the C1 vertebrae in his spine was not ossifying or forming new bone, and it was going to require more scans in about a year to decide what steps they would take next. So the plan was always to wait 1 year from the date of the injury, and then he would undergo new scans, and they would give him a better sense of whether or not the neck is healing properly. So we're over a year now removed from that update. And he was at SummerSlam weekend in Detroit this weekend, and Hausman had the chance to interview him and ask him, how have those recent visits with your doctors gone? And do you have any kind of timeline for a possible return? He said, we did the year checkup, and all that stuff looks great. But on the other side, I also talked to spine specialists, some who have worked on people in the company and did their fusions. And they said, hey, I would not wrestle again if I were you. So to me, at 37, these are the things I think about. I think about quality of life. When I started this job at 23 years old and probably had a bit of a death wish and was okay dying in the ring, now I'm 37. I would like to not die in the ring. Well, that's nice. I would like to not die in the ring. I would like to do other things in my life. So I don't really have a timeline right now. I'm just really grateful not to have any nerve pain. My strength is great. No issues whatsoever. So it's just something I want to be smart about and make the very best decision for my life. Because hopefully I'd like to have a lot of life, a lot of healthy life ahead of me. Unfortunately, right now I have no answers. Sean Ross Sapp on Fightful said that Big E told Chris Featherstone that he and WWE have discussed him possibly becoming a color commentator. So he's got options. If Big E can't get back into the ring, and it's not sounding good right now, he's got options on other ways the company can utilize him, because it's crazy to think that he'll just sit at home and do nothing. I mean, he's valuable to them in ways far beyond just getting in the ring and wrestling. So I'm not worried about him having some kind of future in WWE. I think it sucks if he has to call it quits and doesn't get to go out on his terms. Getting injured, getting dropped on your head, that's not the way somebody wants to retire. And we've had other people that have had very serious spinal problems or neck problems and neck surgery, and they retire. And then years later, look at Edge. That was a little bit of a different issue, but 9 years go by, and the guy comes back and he's wrestling like he never left. You know, he's going out there, no restrictions, he's taking bumps, he's doing all sorts of things that you never would have expected he would be able to do. So you can never say never about the future, whether we'll see Big E back in the ring. I do believe we will get Big E back in the ring at some point, even if it's just for one match. Even if it's a trios match with the New Day or something. I just don't think we've seen the last of him in the ring. But have we seen the last of him as a full-time performer? It sounds like, yeah, we might have. It's a very distinct possibility. I don't want to see him back in the ring if he's got doctors telling him that you shouldn't get back in the ring. Because that's very scary. And he was very fortunate, given the injury that he sustained, that he can move all of his fingers, he can move his legs and arms. He has what he says is a normal, pain-free quality of life. I don't want to see him get back in the ring if the risk is so great that one bad bump and one bad move, and he could be paralyzed in a wheelchair for the rest of his life or worse. I don't want to see that. So whatever decision he makes, hopefully he makes it with all of that feedback he's getting in mind. I'm sure he will. He's a smart guy. It's sad that it happened, but again, he's got plenty of options as far as other things, including commentary that he can do in that company. He could be a manager, he could be a commentator. I mean, shit, at some point they want to make him a fucking guest GM. Or not even a guest GM, but like put him in a position like the one that Adam Pearce is in at some point. They want to have different authority figures on different shows. You know, he could fill that role. He's got the personality for it. He's got charisma for days. Believe me, I'm sure he could excel in a role like that. So there's always going to be something for Big E to do in WWE. It just so happens that getting back in the ring might not be one of those things. But I honestly, from the moment the injury happened and a lot of the stuff that we were hearing about, I kind of got that sense that it might be a long shot for him to ever resume a full-time career in the company. So, and I think he knows that too. I think he's probably been mentally preparing for that from the very first day of the injury. Doesn't make it any easier, to have something taken away from you that you love. But I'm just very happy that physically he seems to be doing very well.